What is going on, Concussion Discussion listeners? Thank you guys for tuning in. It's been 2 weeks. I skipped on last week because there weren't fights going on, and it was post UFC 225, which I'm going to cover now. So glad to be back. It was nice to get a nice little rest in, to not do this every weekend. So it was the first weekend that I took off on doing the podcast. So a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk UFC 225, just thoughts, reactions from that card. Going to talk a few current events. Not a whole lot going on in the world of MMA, but what events we do have are actually pretty significant, so we're going to get into those. And then we'll talk some UFC Singapore. No interviews this week. It's going to be a quick episode. My producer, best friend, brother David will actually be here. It is now Tuesday. He will be here Thursday morning. So, got to do a quick turnaround, quick episode for him. So, a few thoughts going on right now. Let's just get into UFC 220. Oh, but before I talk about UFC 225, if you guys haven't seen Incredibles 2, you have to go watch it. It's not as great as the first one, but it was a pretty good movie. And that was the highlight of my weekend. And I hope you guys had a good weekend as well. But if you didn't go see that, go see it. So let's get into this. UFC 225, let's just do a really quick recap. Like I said, it's going to be quick, guys. I apologize, but, life happens. So Sergio Pettis versus Joey Benavidez. I picked Benavidez to win this fight. And I actually thought Benavidez did win the fight, but the judges gave it to Sergio Pettis. Let's think about it. Pettis is a hometown guy. He trains in Milwaukee, which is not too far at all from Chicago. He gets the decision win. What I didn't like, I didn't hate the decision for Pettis. What I did hate was giving Pettis 3 rounds. There was one judge that gave it to Sergio Pettis 30-27. I don't know how that happens, but it is what it is. So now Pettis, who was ranked number 5 in the world, beats Joey Benavidez, who was ranked number 1 in the world. Benavidez hadn't had a fight in at least a year, maybe a year and a half, so it'll be interesting to see who they match Benavidez up with next. Now for Sergio Pettis' last loss comes from Henry Cejudo, who is fighting for the title against Demetrius Johnson, UFC 227 in LA in August. So I guess maybe Sergio can fight another top 5 guy to solidify his position, or he can wait it out for the winner and possibly rematch with Cejudo or fight Demetrius Johnson. So there's that. Anthony Smith, Rashad Evans. Jesus Christ, this is rough. So Rashad Evans has now lost his last 4 or 5. It's rough to watch, man, because Rashad Evans he's a pioneer. He's an Ultimate Fighter winner. He's went on to win the light heavyweight championship when he beat Chuck Liddell. He's a pioneer. He's a great guy. But then he went out there against Anthony Smith, and this was Anthony Smith's debut at 100 or 205 pounds. And it didn't even look like they were in the same weight class. Anthony Smith looked huge, and I hope he stays at that weight class because it looks healthy. It looks good for him. What happened? Anthony Smith up against the cage, and he put a knee right to Rashad's chin, and Rashad went out immediately. So I don't think Anthony Smith earns a top 15 opponent quite yet at light heavyweight, but I would like to see Rashad Evans retire. But definitely Anthony Smith needs to stay at light heavyweight, no doubt. Oh, Mirsad Bektic fought Ricardo Lamas. This was a good fight. I picked Ricardo Lamas to win the fight via KO or TKO. Boy, was I wrong. Mirsad Bektic looked great, man. His wrestling was good. His striking was even better. He just looked so well-rounded. He looked so good everywhere. And I don't think Mirsad Bektic, I don't know, he wasn't ranked in the top 10, but Lamas was ranked number 5 in the world. So that'll be an interesting, what they do with Bektic next, because he definitely, after, dealing with Ricardo Lamas like that, Bektic deserves a top 5 guy. I don't know what you do with Ricardo Lamas, because that's 2 fights he's lost in a row. The last one to Josh Emmett via brutal KO. But don't know what they do with Lamas, but I love both guys. Claudia Gadelha versus Carla Esparza. God, man, Carla Esparza looked good. I picked Claudia to win, which she did, but, Carla really, really, really surprised me. She finally looked confident on her feet, actually knocked down Claudia at one point, but Claudia gets it done via split decision split decision, so all 3 rounds. Man, it's tough for Carla. I don't know what's next for Carla, really, but Claudia, you have to keep her in that top tier, ready for a title shot at any given time. She's active, and if you look at her record, man, she's fought the best of the best. So good for her, and for Carla, man, she looked really good. I think she'll be just fine her next fight. Chicago native Curtis Blades versus Alistair Overeem. Blades knocked out Overeem via brutal elbows. Excuse me. The other big joint in your body. I always got those confused as a kid. The doctor would say, give me your knees, and for whatever reason, I would just give him my elbows. I could never figure those things out. Anyways, so he gets it done, knocks Overeem out. So Curtis Blades, I think, was ranked number 6 before this fight. And, he fought Overeem, who was ranked number 2 in the world. So that puts Curtis Blades really in that top 3 conversation. He called for a title shot. Afterwards, I think it's a little bit too soon for Curtis Blades. I would give him maybe 1 or 2 more top 10 guys, top 5 guys, because I think at that DC Stipe level, he does kind of get eaten up. And I don't know what is next for Overeem, because Overeem's fought everyone really in that top 10. So I'm really interested to see what they do with Overeem. Oh my God, here's a shit show. Mike Jackson versus CM Punk. I got some flack for calling him Phil Brooks in the last episode, because that is in fact his name. But regardless of that, the end result was Mike Jackson really just dealt with CM Punk and, just kind of boxed him up, controlled the fight everywhere. And, looked cocky, kind of was throwing these bolo punches on top of CM Punk, was showing off, doing this, doing that. And so after the biggest takeaway from this is the incompetence of Dana White at times. And I love Dana as a promoter. He's the best promoter in the business. But what he's not good at is taking accountability for what he's bad at. So, to give you some background, he demoted the Curtis Blades Alistair Overeem fight to the prelims to bump up Mike Jackson, CM Punk, and said, when you sell as many pay-per-views as CM Punk, when Alistair Overeem sells as many pay-per-views as CM Punk, then come talk to me, right? Okay, terrible argument. Okay, he's a better promoter than that. It's probably not all of his decision either. So the fight's a shit show. It's boring. It is what it is. And in the post-fight interview, Dana White says, I should have put that as the UFC Fight Pass exclusive fight prelim headliner. Well, no shit, Dana White. No shit, you should have done that. You've got 2 0-1 guys fighting in the UFC. One is a professional wrestler. The other one is a photographer. This fight was never supposed to happen. And Dana White just wants to blame everything on Mike Jackson, just saying he should have got him out of there, this and that. No, you should have never booked this fight to begin with. CM Punk had his chance against Mickey Gall, at UFC 203 in Cleveland, Ohio. It did not work out. Don't try to make fetch happen. You know what I'm saying? Little Mean Girls reference there for you. It's one of my favorite movies. Anyways, take some accountability. The fight never should have happened. Stop blaming it on Mike Jackson. Stop all that. You're the promoter. You're the boss. You're the figurehead. You're the brain. You're the nucleus. You call it what you want, the engine, the train. I don't care what you call it. But Dana White is the head of the business. He has to do better than that. Or at least take responsibility for the mistake that you made. All right, that's enough. I'll get off my soapbox on that. I was so upset about that fight even happening, especially in the position that it was. So moving on. But Mike Jackson gets it done, unanimous decision. Tai Tuivasa versus Andrei Arlovski. Tai Tuivasa, this was kind of a Australian-run card and kind of Australian takeover in Chicago. Tai Tuivasa fought Andrei Arlovski. Tai Tuivasa got it done. I had it 2-1 to 29-28. I believe that's what all the judges gave Tai Tuivasa for the victory. The weird thing about this is I expected a KO from Tai Tuivasa, but Arlovski looked really good, and at his age, that does not happen often. So Tai Tuivasa, you got to give him a top 10 guy. Arlovski was prior, but that's not a whole lot being top 10 in that heavyweight division. It's not a whole lot of talent. It's a lot of age, a lot of grandpas walking around there. So curious what they see, what they do with Tai Tuivasa, and same with Arlovski. I really don't know at this time. Moving on, Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson. I picked Megan to get it done via unanimous decision, and Holly Holm did what we haven't seen out of her, which we know she can do, is wrestle. She's got one of the best wrestling coaches in the game. She came out, she got hurt pretty quick in the beginning from a knee, some elbows, which we know Megan's good at. And then Holly took her down, really. Oh, can we get Megan Anderson? Oh, my God. If you haven't seen the fight, please go back and watch it, or just a picture of it. Can we get Megan Anderson? She lives in Australia. We need to get her a tanning bed. She was the same color as the canvas. She looked like Casper. It was awful. Poor Megan Anderson. I wouldn't fuck with her. But anyways, so yeah, Holly Holm gets it done. Unanimous decision. Now what's next for Holly? I don't know. I don't know what's next for Holly. She's got options. She can go fight. Go back down to 135 and fight Amanda Nunes, which she says she wants, or they could give her the Cyborg rematch, or she could really fight anyone. She'll be just fine. She's still the chick that knocked out Ronda Rousey out cold, so she will be just fine. And Megan, the Megan Anderson situation is a weird one at 145 pounds, because the UFC, I think, was really kind of banking on Megan winning this fight, so they had an opponent for Chris Cyborg. Well, now Megan lost, so you can't give her Cyborg for a title shot. And who else are you going to give her that fights at 145? There's like 3 chicks that fight at 145. I wouldn't mind seeing Megan Anderson versus CM Punk, but that would never happen. Yeah, I'm kidding, but I don't know what is next for Megan Anderson, but I hope she comes back sooner rather than later. And then Colby Covington, Rafael Dos Anjos. I told you guys, I told you. I'm so passionate about this one because I had people, right after the last episode dropped, had people inboxing me or DMing me saying, you're wrong, Dos Anjos, his stand-up's better, he's more well-rounded. Yeah, sure, his stand-up's better, and he showed that. But Covington's pressure, and this is what I've talked about, his pressure is just too much. It's like he has a God-given gift of cardio. He just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming, and he never stops. And that's exactly what happened in the Dos Anjos fight. I've heard people talk about, if you could and these are big media figures saying, if you gave Dos Anjos the fight, I wouldn't blame you. No, Dos Anjos did not win that fight. Dos Anjos clearly lost that fight 4 rounds to 1. Colby Covington won that fight. It was a good fight. Covington looked good. And Dos Anjos simply did not. He looked outworked and overpowered. I love Dos Anjos, but yeah, he simply got outworked. And then Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. Okay, so this is a rematch. It was a good fight. So Yoel misses weight by a pound. So allegedly, the commission was supposed to give him 2 hours to cut the additional weight. He came in at 186 originally, and then he had to come in at 185 pounds exactly. So then he goes back, starts cutting weight, and allegedly the commission says, nope, you're done. We don't like the way you look. You have to go weigh in now. So he gets on the scale at 185.2 pounds. So 1/5 of the pound he misses weight by. So he loses 30% of his purse, and they ended up getting Fight of the Night award, which is a $50,000 bonus. He doesn't get that. So that's a lot of money that he's out of already. I've said this time and time again when it comes to New York, Illinois, and I'm from Illinois, so I can say this. New York, Illinois, some of these states that are really rookies at this sport, stop having fights there. Stick to California. Stick to Vegas. Hell, go back to England more often. Texas, their commission's just fine. But for whatever reason, these New York, Illinois state commissions, they suck. They suck so bad. His Yoel Romero's manager said that he looked fine. He was cutting weight as normal, but they cut him. They made him stop cutting weight an hour early. He definitely could have shed those 0.2 pounds. So on to the fight. First, second round, I had it 10-9 Whittaker. Third round, I had it 10-9 Yoel. Whittaker in the fourth round, I had it 10-9 for him. And then in the fifth, I had it 10-8 Yoel Romero. Personally, I had it, if you do that math that I just said, a 47-47. That's a draw with that 10-8 round at the end. If that was not a 10-8 round, I do not know what is. And none of the judges gave Yoel Romero a 10-8 round either, which, you could maybe argue the third, or maybe you could definitely argue the fifth, as I am right now, being a 10-8 round. If that fifth round was not a 10-8 round, I don't know what is, and that's another example of the incompetence of these commissions. These judges are not hired by the UFC. They are employed by the state commission, the same people that stopped his weight cutting. All the same people, proven to be incompetent. Get them out of there. Don't have fights there anymore, please. So, what actually happened is the judges gave Whittaker the decision. I had it 47-47 Yoel Romero, but, it is what it is. I'm not a judge. So, Robert Whittaker remains your champ at 185 pounds. For Whittaker, I guess, he fights Kelvin next, Kelvin Gastelum. There's some argument there between Kelvin and Chris Weidman. Then Yoel Romero, there's been a lot of talk about getting Yoel up to 205 pounds, as he has missed weight twice in a row. He missed weight the first time because he came in on 3 weeks' notice, so you can't fault him too much for that. And I definitely can't fault him for the commission's incompetence on this one. I say stay at 185, fight a top contender, and then come back for that title, because I had Yoel as a draw on that one. But I digress. Okay, current events. Few things to talk about. So weigh-in times, as many of you guys have heard already, this is not breaking news. This is one of the downsides of me not doing a podcast for 1 week is there's a lot of things that, a lot of news that breaks. But Dana White wants to move the weigh-in times from the 9 o'clock now to the 4 or 5 o'clock weigh-in times. So the way that the UFC has done it in the past is they have the weigh-ins at 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's televised and all that, right? And then they moved it to the morning weigh-ins so fighters can weigh in at 9 o'clock in the morning, anywhere from 9 to 11. And then they have more time. They still have the ceremonial weigh-ins, so it's not, they have that later on in the day. It's just ceremonial, so that the fighters aren't actually weighing in there because they've already weighed in earlier in the day. And then they have the idea of the earlier weigh-ins is to have, the fighters, gives them more time to recover and all that. Well, now because a few people have missed weight, Dana White wants to go back to the 4 or 5 o'clock weigh-ins. Look, I don't agree with that because I think that if the timeline regardless. If you tell me that I have to show up to work at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 p.m., if I'm late, I'm probably just going to be late regardless, right? They know their deadline. They know their timeline. If they don't make it, moving the time isn't going to change anything. UFC 225. Oh, this is embarrassing. So I just gave you guys kind of the recap, but what's super embarrassing for the UFC right now is that UFC 225 only did 250,000 buys, and I just found that out about 2 hours ago. So this is new news. A lot of people were picking this pay-per-view to do 600,000-700,000 plus. I had it ranged at anywhere from 350 to 425. Because it was stacked. Definitely the best pay-per-view of the year, but I cannot believe that it's only done 250,000 pay-per-view buys. Just ridiculous, man. But it kind of shows you the state of the UFC right now, and also kind of exposes the whole illegal streaming stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. I'm not an expert at all of that, but 225,000 pay-per-view buys, the UFC, or 250,000 pay-per-view buys, the UFC cannot be happy about that, as stacked as they made this card. Ronda Rousey got inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Don't like her as a person personally, but I think she definitely deserves it. Pioneer of the sport for sure, and I don't think there's any more deserving person as far as the new pioneers that deserves it more than her. Ali Quinta versus Justin Gaethje announced. That's a good fight, but I will take early on before I do my research. I'll take Gaethje in that fight, but that's going to be a barn burner. Greg Hardy, oh my God, oh fuck me, come on. Greg Hardy, he's a former NFL player, got released from the Panthers because of some domestic violence accusations on his old lady. Then he went to the Cowboys, some issues there, got released, started doing some MMA stuff, and Dana White let him on the Contender Series, which I actually have to catch in about 10 minutes, so I got to wrap this shit up. But I just think it's despicable that they allowed him this opportunity. Greg Hardy ended up winning the fight, but whoever Greg Hardy fights in the future, I hope they just throw him to the wolves. So that's it for current events. Let's talk some UFC Singapore really quick. First off, how dare you, UFC? These fights start at 4:30 a.m. on the Eastern time zone. The main card, the whole 4 fights that they have, I'm going to cover 3 of them. Starts at 8 a.m. I'll be up for them, but how dare you? So, first fight to talk about really, Jessica Rose Clark versus number 10, Jessica Eye. So, this is interesting. So, I was kind of doing my research earlier, as I do every time. I want you guys to listen to this. This is crazy. So Jessica Ai, she won her last fight against Kalindra Faria. I don't know how to say her name. Via split decision. But listen to this. I'm going to go all the way back from her UFC record starting at UFC 166. No contest against Sarah Kaufman. Lost via split decision by Alexis Davis. She beats Leslie Smith. Lost to Miesha Tate. Lost to Juliana Pena. Lost to Sarah McMahon. Lost to Bethe Correia. And then wins via split decision in her last fight in January. Now, I say lost a bunch there. She's 2-5 in the UFC. But listen to those losses. Alexis Davis, Miesha Tate, Juliana Pena, Sarah McMahon, Bethe Correia. I mean, the UFC has given this girl no favors. But in this, unfortunately, I'm a bit of a fan of Jessica Rose Clark, number 9 ranked strawweight in the world. Flyweight, not strawweight, excuse me. I'm going to take Jessica Rose Clark here. I think she gets it done. She's got an impressive win against Paige Van Zandt, and then she's got a split decision win over my girl Beck Rawlings. So I will take Jessica Rose Clark, but I will not be surprised at all if Jessica Ai gets it done. Number 7 light heavyweight OSP versus number 13 Tyson Pedro. I like Tyson Pedro. I just think this is a little bit too much too soon for Tyson Pedro. I'll take OSP there. And then Donald Cerrone, number 11 in the world at welterweight, versus Leon Edwards, number 13. Leon Edwards is 26 years old. He's young. I think that he has a point when he says that the old guard, the old fighters are slowly fading away, referring to Cowboy in that sense. But for this one, again, this may be a little bit biased, but when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. I think Leon Edwards has a huge career in front of him, but I think Donald Cerrone gets it done, and I might be being a little bit biased. So I will take Jessica Rose Clark via split decision. Again, I'll take OSP via third round KO, and I'll take Donald Cerrone via fourth round rear naked choke. So that's it. So sorry I couldn't do the episode last week, guys, but thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And until next time, enjoy the fights. Enjoy your week. And I think the next time I'll talk to you guys will be prior to UFC 226, July 7th, which is Stipe versus Daniel Cormier. I don't think there's fights in between then other than Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. So until next time, guys, cheers. Take care.